Officially welcome everyone to Sustainability number 12, which will be the last one for the year. As you can see and you figured out, you've got some new faces with you today. I'm Marina.
And I'm Kiralee. And we are both volunteers with the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network. And as Marina said, this is our last Sustainability for the year. And so I hope you've got your mugs. Perhaps not as big as ours, but any mug will do. And today we even have some lemon myrtle tea leaves from Chris and John Boland's garden, nonetheless. So would you like a bit in yours? Yes, thank you. I think it's what you do, but I have to tell you that Chris actually, they were fresh when Chris put them in her tea. So I'm not sure if we'll be sipping this out with our teeth or something because they've lost a bit of moisture.
We'll find out. Before we start with the presentation, we'd like to kick off with an acknowledgement of country. So we'd like to acknowledge that our event today is held on Pandania, the traditional land of the Kaurna people, and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands from which we might be working from today with so many people online. We'd like to pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging, recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships with the land and country. That deep understanding of place is integral to everything that we do. Now, the session today will cover an introduction to the space of multi-tenancy solar and the issues limiting traditional solar implementation on apartments. From there, Solshare will be introduced and a quick explanation on its use and function is going to be provided. Case studies showing the application of Solshare in new and existing builds will be explored. And for that, we have Will.
Yes, hello, Will. Thank you for being here. Now, Will, I might just give a bit of an introduction about you, and then you can fill in any gaps or add anything else that you'd like to after. So I'm just letting people know that Will Anstee is a business development consultant with Allume Energy. Allume provides the world's only hardware that allows multi-tenancy buildings to share a rooftop solar system, which is very clever. And Will's role involves facilitating Solshare to be included on both new or existing building assets. On the day-to-day, Will typically works with a range of stakeholders, such as social housing providers, developers, consultants, and strata committees. And this work allows Will to follow his passion, which is advocating for energy quality in social housing. I think we have outside of work, Will enjoys getting outdoors, surfing, hiking, camping, as well as spending time with his dog, Ollie, who needs lots of walks and runs, as we've found out. So I'll hand it over to you now, Will.
Thanks, team. Pleasure. Thank you for the intro, the kind intro. It's an honour to be here with the team and on the 12th SustainabiliTEA. I don't usually drink tea, I'm more of a coffee person, but I've made an exception today, so I've been able to enjoy that so far. So yeah, as mentioned, thanks so much for coming. I'm from Allume Energy, and I'll be chatting about Solshare. So, Allume Energy, I'm Will, part of our commercial team for our Australian aspect. We are an international company, but Australia is our key focus, especially South Australia as well. So I'll be introducing our Solshare product today, but mainly outlining some of the common issues surrounding solar in multi-tenancy buildings and how it looks in different types of sites and types of assets as well. So when, before Allume came along or throughout our process, we did a fair bit of research with multi-tenancy building residents. So that included developments or new developers looking at their target market and what they needed, but also existing strata bodies, body corporates, owners committees, all fairly interchangeable words on the day-to-day that we deal with. So one of the biggest things, and more prominently in the last 6 to 12 months, is residents are wary of the increases in electricity costs. I know, having lived in Adelaide myself, although not at the moment, energy over there is significantly higher than what it is in Victoria and other states. although we do have a massive renewable presence. So from there, that amplifies any increases in electricity. There was also the thing, just because you live in an apartment, you don't want to be overlooked when it comes to solar. So compared to, say, if you lived in your own home, you sort of want to have the same rights and abilities and capabilities to extend solar to your tenancy and enjoy the, reducing your reliance on the grid, basically. When you're in a body corporate or strata, you also wanted to be able to invest in a shared investment that makes money. So typically, all the sinking fund or your strata fees go into maintaining your building. And generally it's, just capital costs to, say, repaint your building, upgrade different aspects and appliances throughout the building. But if there was a way of making money as a collective, that'd be a real big positive. The other big thing was people wanted full control of their energy retailer. So you wanted the ability to say, if I'm on AGL, I want to go over and check if Origin has a better deal, for example, or any other retailer. There's so many out there, but having that control to be able to do that without, restrictions in place, either reducing your ability to do that or preventing you altogether, depending on your financial or rental sort of environment. The big thing is you wanted to be able to future-proof their place of residency. So whether that's batteries, EV charging, there's a lot of vehicle-to-grid talk coming in with some Canberra studies at the moment. So that was a key thing that we needed to make sure that we were kind of meeting in any sort of product development that we undertook. So from there, we developed a product called the Solshare. So it's a nice glossy box, about the same size as an inverter. A solar inverter. We've got our lovely CEO Cameron in the middle there, and then Christy, our CTO, as well. As for the Solshare itself, it's technically the world's only hardware that allows you to connect apartments to a shared rooftop solar system. So Solshare as a product is a hardware with underlying software. Without boring everyone for details, we have won a few awards with the Clean Energy Council, a few state-by-state awards. Carbon neutral awards 2 years ago as well, which actually 2 years. When I used to work for a commercial install company, we were part of one in Hurdle Square, just in the city of Adelaide. So it was a nice competition, or not competition, but award to win that helped the Adelaide residents as well. One of the biggest thing is it is Australian made as well. So over here down in Melbourne, in Hawthorn, is where we manufacture, and then we export to our US, UK, and NZ teams. We have over 1,300 apartments connected in Australia as well, which is quite cool. But that's all the kind of minor niceties. I guess everyone's probably curious as to how it works. Go into a little bit of that. I'm gonna move. I can see everyone's cameras, so let's get rid of that. Perfect. So on your left is a nice little diagram of a typical multi-tenancy building. As you can see on the rooftop, we've got 3 PV panels here, or 3 arrays. So traditionally you'll have one larger array, then you'll have one feed that goes to your ground floor, which is commonly where your electricity meter board is, where they're co-located for all your meters for a tenancy. From there you'll have a nice little inverter that converts your DC energy into AC, so it's usable by by the site. Now the Allume box, the nice little white box there, sits in adjacent to your meter board. So this is where it has one 3-phase solar connection in, so just one solar connection that comes in, and then that spits out a connection to each individual energy meter or retailer grade meter on site. Now these can be either your standard electrical meters that you can switch between Origin, etc. Could be an embedded network meter as well. All that matters is Solshare does connect more than one electrical meter to one system, which is why it's unique. Now, the best part of this is, now that you're in an apartment building, it allows you to share solar between your fellow neighbours as well and the other tenancies. And the way that it does this is because everyone's sharing a system, there's the economies of scale that everyone can pull from the same system, and you're not limited traditionally by your own small solar system. As mentioned before, it's basically all it is from a technical standpoint is a larger PV array on an apartment building. Keeping in mind, because there's the sharing aspect, you really don't need as many panels as traditionally thought. So it makes it quite usable and very friendly for apartments and any other multi-tenancy building. And all we do is add that Solshare module and a couple of little other minor bits, which are quite simple to install. So I guess I've sort of covered the hardware aspect there. The point where it really comes into its own, though, is the underlying software. So the biggest issue we found when it came to solar was the inability to equitably provide solar to tenancies in multi-tenancy apartments or buildings. So Solshare itself traditionally works on a month-to-month basis. And what we do when we set it up to provide an equitable share to each tenancy, at the end of the month, every tenant within the building will receive the same amount of solar. So for example, if you had 10 apartments, each would technically then have 10% allocation each. So whatever that solar system made within that month period, at the very end of the month, every tenant would have received 10% of that solar generation. So irrespective of what month and the amount of solar that system made, each tenant is guaranteed to get their proportion of solar distributed directly behind the meter to their tenancy. So what that means is, on the day-to-day, it can vary on who gets how much and how much solar goes to you. So the best analogy I always go with is if you, for example, work from home Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for example, but then work from the office Thursday, Friday. On Thursday, Friday, you won't really have a need for your solar usage. So what the Solshare actually does is it prioritizes sending your Thursday, Friday usage when on the days that you are home. So that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So what that means is you can access a higher amount than you typically would with a standalone system on those days that you are home. And from there, I'll bring up a graphical to go and explain that a little bit further. So the comparison we've got here is above here is just a 1.5 kilowatt. It's actually a 1.8 kilowatt system in towards the cooler months of the year. If you had, this is a typical system that an apartment owner, if they wanted an individual system, would obtain. So as you can see, the black line represents your electricity usage. So there's a little bit of a spike in the morning. May have been out in the morning, then they come home for lunch, and then the evening, maybe picking up the kids if they've got kids. And then some higher usage in the evening as you're cooking dinner. Now, with a typical solar system, the solar is there to complement and reduce your reliance on the grid. So it offsets the need to obtain energy from the grid. So during the middle of the day, it offsets a small proportion of your energy requirements. But in the morning, where the green line is above the black line, it means that any of that energy generated at that time is actually just exported back to the grid. Now, you do get a feed-in tariff. But as we all know, if you've watching the news and regulation changes that, it continually reduces closer and closer to zero. So I do know when I was working on a few projects in SA, we were around the 4 to 8 cent mark. Similar in Victoria, but when you're purchasing electricity for 30, 35 cents, it's quite a big mismatch when it comes to that. So the idea would be, in an ideal world, in a traditional situation, would be you could chuck on a battery on your individual system, and then you can save that energy to use. Now, in apartments, that's not as easily possible. You're very limited by your space. So that's where we've got a system here. So this is direct data we've taken from a Mirvac, one of our Mirvac partners. They did a development here in Victoria. So from here, they had 1.8 kilowatts of solar allocated per tenancy. Of course, there was quite a few tenancies, so the overall array was quite large. So what that actually means is, so in the mornings, they're not having to export as much energy back to the grid. Now, in this scenario, there was still a little bit of export because there just wouldn't have been a demand for energy by other tenants during that time. But what that meant was, instead of being limited by your 1.8, as you're up here, you could only get 1.2 in this situation. What the Solshare allows you to do is share that overall system. So as a tenant, you can then access what we've got here, 4.6, 4.7 kilowatts of solar at any one time. So then you can maximize your coverage of peak demands on site, and then you're increasing your self-consumption of solar. Because traditionally with a standard solar system, you might get a 30% self-consumption rate. With Solshare, it's usually up towards that 45, 50% mark. And then the best bit is, in the evenings, because you're pulling from a larger solar system, there's more electricity demand coverage in the evenings as well, because you're pulling from a larger system. You're not limited by that smaller curve there. Now, I'll go through these in the Q&A a little bit if you've got any questions, so definitely note them down because I love chatting about this aspect of it. Now, what is the benefit? At the end of the day, what are the benefits to the residents? So we've gone through, the sharing of solar, which is great. But apart from that, these are probably more related to general solar benefits, but we'll have a flick through anyway, just to verbalise. So on average, each tenant usually offsets about 2 tonnes per year of CO2 emissions, which is a great result, and that's per tenancy. So from an overall site perspective, it's a lot more. You can measure that and view that data as well through the monitoring portals. So from there, you still get your feed-in tariff as well. So the way that it's integrated is energy retailer doesn't know the difference if you're on a Solshare system or a standalone home, because it's integrated behind the meter. So with that, you still get your feed-in tariff for any export. For example, if you're not home the entire month, you still want to get something for your energy, so you just get that energy exported. On average, though, more towards our Vic and New South Wales is that $300 to $500 per year per apartment mark, from around the 1.8 kilowatts of solar allocated, which for any solar installers who are aware of the typical cost, that's a really good result. One of the best bits is with Solshare, you can mix and combine 3-phase and single-phase connections, because the Solshare itself is technically 3-phase. So what that means is you can actually connect your common area in a strata building or a body corporate. So whether that's offices, townhouses, apartments, with the major focus being apartments, but you can combine that 3-phase common as well as your individual connections. So don't just get the savings from your individual apartment, you also get your common area savings as well. So you get a bit of a double whammy, and that's what makes it so attractive for stratas as well. Because traditionally you just get a common area system where the export is quite high. From there, I'll touched on before on the Doncaster or our Foley Apartments Mirvac project. So with this, we had a 70 kilowatt system installed just over 12 months ago now on this new build. Now, Mirvac's focus was they didn't actually extend solar to every tenancy. They were limited by roof space a little bit. So what they did is they did the top 39 prestige and penthouse apartments with Solshare access. They found that these sold really, really quickly and before any of the other ones that didn't have solar. There is also scope to say increase the price of tenancies, but Mirvac was great because as it is such a small component cost per tenancy, they kept the prices the same. That may change in future though, because usually that's a massive financial incentive for the developer as well to extend that to the tenants. So from that, they had about 1.8 kilowatts of solar allocated to them. In the first 9 months, they saw a $300 on average electricity bill saving from the tenants that we monitored. The tenants typically were two bedroom homes with 1 to 2 people living in them. So pretty good result considering that. And we just did the 12-month thing, and it was about 410 overall for the 12 months. Which was a great result for Mirvac and the new residents that moved into that new build tenancy. This is a little quote from Jackie and Rod, which were the tenants. So they were drawn to the building because of the sustainability features, specifically our Solshare tech. And the biggest thing was having a bit more independence from the energy grid as well, and contributing to climate action. So for them, they weren't excluded from obtaining solar for their tenancy just because they did live in that apartment. Now, we'll touch on just a few of the major benefits for building projects as well. So as it's become a bit of a buzzword more recently, ESG projects is very, very key at the moment. So not so much just an ESD focus, but thinking ESG. So it's, trying to avoid and go away from any potential greenwashing, for example, and coming into saying, how do we actually make significant environmental, social, and, change in governance? So Solshare fits in quite well with these projects, mainly around all the work in social housing that we do. It fits in quite nicely. Covers the environmental aspect, which is that renewable energy, which speaks for itself. The social aspect is being able to provide that equitable access to solar. So especially in social housing, this is where the tenants are at most risks at any, cost of living increases. So this is where guaranteeing solar allocated to them without anyone taking a cut for themselves and extending the full benefit of solar is so important in this aspect. But it's also the governance aspect of this. So ensuring that if you are undertaking a renewable energy project, especially in social housing, is the benefit actually going to the tenants or is it going to a third party? So it depends on the project, of course, and there's the right avenue for every project. But this is a key thing that we see becoming more and more prevalent. And of course, the retailer freedom of choice is such a key one as well, especially with all the embedded network changes coming in. Now, in saying that, in an ideal world, we'd have an embedded network and Solshare, but because Solshare does allow you to keep your retailer freedom of choice, we commonly see more installs without embedded networks. And we are seeing a lot more EV and battery integration, especially with SA Housing, Authority for Public Housing in SA, which they're leading the front on, which is awesome for Adelaide. We'll cover off one last case study before we go to Q&A, and I'll hand back over to the team. Now, this is a New South Wales project where we had 17 apartments connected. With this, we had 27 kilowatts spread over the 3 buildings. Now, because of how efficient Solshare works, we didn't have to put solar on all 3 buildings. We were able to put it on one and then power all 3 buildings from that, which was quite a win. So you don't have to dredge concrete, etc., which can be a little bit more expensive. So for this site, it was very cost effective. The tenants were very, very happy. This was with Evolve Housing. And in the first 12 months from May 2020 to April 2021, there was a $437 saving on average per apartment. And these are fairly small apartments. So we were very, very happy with that result. Now, this is a retrofit, so no different to if it was a standard strata. But in this situation, it ended up being a social housing provider there. Now, that covers off my last case study. The last little photo we've got here is a project up in Queensland, just a standard apartment retrofit with about a 1.5 kilowatt allocation. So as you can see, wasn't many panels that were needed. There's quite a lot of roof space for future. So this is quite appealing for new developers, especially when you want to use, you want a rooftop garden, you want some rooftop freedom area as well. So from there, I'll hand back over. Hopefully that was a little bit interesting and got some thoughts going or questions ready for me.
That was great, Will. Thank you so much. It's such a very clever system. I just have a question.
Sure.
You've managed to get around the extra costs associated with embedded networks, and people can still choose, have their retailer of choice. Was it difficult to get that through the governance sort of, because it's such a neat and clever way of being able to distribute the solar power without all that extra added cost, that now comes with embedded networks. Was it very hard to sort of get it through the governance side of things?
Yeah, and is that in reference to working with developers or more on the DNSP aspect, or a bit of both?
Well, yes, more on the DNSP aspect and the regulators.
Yeah, so on the DNSP side of things and even the regulators as well, embedded networks really make sense from that 60 plus space. Sometimes it's down to apartments as little as 30, for example, as far as tenancies go. So with Solshare, it has quite a broad range. So anything from 6 to 90 is fairly suitable. So what that means is that 6 to 30 apartment range, which is a lot of Adelaide, that 1 to 8 stories is fairly common. What that meant that without an embedded network or where it didn't make sense or where it was too expensive, the only option was to go down that individual solar system route. So what that also meant is then you have any export being generated by an individual tenancy amplified or multiplied by the amount of tenancies that are on site. So the issues that DNSPs came across, and SAPN is a key one on this front, was that this is going to basically provide or increase the instability on the grid. So if you've got too much export in peak export times, it's going to be an issue. So it was actually quite timely when we came into the market because we could present Solshare, and it was an indirect demand management tool of, working with apartments, and instead of having an individual system for everyone, we had everyone pulling from the same system, which meant it reduced the demand from the grid, but it also maximized any or minimized any export back to the grid via excess solar. So from a DNSP perspective, they loved it. It also meant that, standard metering could be kept, so there wasn't a requirement to engage in embedded networks as well. And as far as everyone was concerned, it meant that there was now another option for developers or stratas, etc., to present or undertake. So it meant there was more breadth on, the availability of options. which meant from there, they said, yeah, this is great, let's go and do it. Keeping in mind that Solshare is the only way still to connect more than 1 meter to one system. But I'm hoping that will change in future, and there should be a bit more competition in the market. But all our R&D was in-house, so we've still got a few more years, I think, before we see some competitors. So we'll see how we go. If that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. It's so clever, you know, and it gets over that hurdle of choice, you know, and the idea that everyone needs to have a choice of retailer, which you know, which is a whole nother topic, which, you know, some of which I think in trying to enable people to have choice, they've actually taken away some of the choice from people, but that's a whole nother story.
Can see some people on video, which is great, and I think Andrew's unmuted as well. So
fantastic.
Yeah, hi guys. I was just wondering, Will, and you just touched on it there, from an economy of scale perspective, in the South Australian market, do you have many sort of case studies that would be applicable to the South Australian market particularly? And then, you know, as you just mentioned there before, I'm really interested in the economy of scale to justify the spend on the system. You mentioned there before, you know, traditionally, or there is a lot in say Adelaide of smaller development type thing rather than having 20 plus units or high rise or whatever the situation is. So, you know, that's where that question is based, around that economy of scale for smaller type development.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Andrew. Commonly, we see anything that's, you know, 8 single-phase apartments or connections or more is where it typically makes sense, because you're also rolling in your common area, light and power a lot of the time, although that load can vary. The benefit of that as well is Solshare, you can actually modify the distribution methods as well from that. So in 12 months' time, you find your common area needs to be increased to a larger proportion of the system to get the best, you know, optimized aspect of that. You can do that as well.
And yeah, sorry, mate. Just I was just going to go touch on that. You know, and this sort of touches on the freedom of choice for individual tenancies. Does the system allow flexibility to turn individual tenancies on and off within, you know, so you might create a grid across that covers all tenancies. But if the choice is that I don't want to participate and contribute toward the costs through the strata, that can be turned off. However, if in the future, 2 years down the track, I sell up and move on, and the person taking over comes in and says, yeah, that's my gig, I want to be in it.
Yeah. So one of the, I guess one of my favorite aspects of Solshare is when it is installed in that strata. So when we work with those retrofit sort of deals, what will happen is everyone is generally physically connected if it gets passed through strata. So for example, if you had a 15 apartment complex and 10 of those 15 wanted to take part, so from there, or if we go, I think, what is the rate to get things passed? About 75%. So let's just say 12 of the 15 agree to take part, but there's 3 that don't want to take part yet. You know, for varying reasons. One might not believe in solar, which is still quite common. One person may just not be able to afford to take part if there's not enough money in the capital sinking fund. Ken loved that one. It's more common, unfortunately, than I'd like it to be. So what happens there is everyone is physically connected, but only the 12 of the 15 that want to take part will be turned on for solar. So that means in future, as you mentioned, Andrew, if say you move out and someone else moves in who wants to, you know, then take on the solar component, they can then just work out with their strata, and go, well, you know, I'll contribute that portion. It might be, you know, 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000, depending on the install cost. They might have paid enough strata levies to offset that as well. So what that now means is they can go, I can get my solar connected and turned on for me now. So then from there, it might be 13 of the 15 are connected. And then the other 2 might, you know, they might just be rentals and the landlord wasn't keen to, you know, take part, even though depending on the situation, might be able to claim tax benefits. Obviously not financial advice. And from there, you know, people might move out, 2 new people move in there as well. And then they go, oh, I want to take part. And you might have all 15 connected. But the key thing is everyone's physically connected to get from the get-go. And then as you know, people want to come online, they can be turned online, and it's very simple, turn on and off. So where we work with power purchase agreements, for example, for companies where they own the assets, and if the solar's connected to, say, a power purchase agreement, you can turn it on and off as well. So it's quite a useful tool to facilitate extending solar to multi-res.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries, Andrew.
Thanks, Will. I think we had James who'd unmuted as well.
Yes, I just had a quick question about, has this been put on to sort of office buildings or anything like that?
Yeah, good question, James. So, actually, when I first started with Allume, well, it was actually January myself. I used to ride this particular route to work, and I remember seeing quite a nice office building, and I thought, oh, if that was an apartment building, that'd be quite perfect for Solshare. Long story short, we'd actually installed Solshare on this 12 office building, or 12 unit office building. So yeah, there's no discrepancy or anything multi-res with co-located meter panels is suitable. So whether it's commercial office buildings, whether it's small commercial shopping strips, anything multi-tenancy works. So Bell Plaza in Adelaide is a project that's on the go at the moment as well with Solshare. So hopefully probably next year maybe, and we'll have that online. So that's a good example of where we can implement it. And offices are quite good because everyone's there during the day, so you get best use of sharing throughout the day. So it's quite an exciting space. And I wasn't going to touch on this as well, but if anyone understands environmental upgrade agreements, which have just more so come on recently in SA, you can combine those with 100% commercial sites as well, which is quite exciting. But yeah, feel free to get in touch
Awesome.
if you want to know more about
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you again, James and Will. Christina, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I'm just wondering if you wanted to add batteries, or the strata wanted to add batteries later down the track, do you need to, like, can anybody do it, or do you need to go back to Allume and Solshare? And also, are there any ongoing costs through Allume or Solshare, or is it just like a set and connect and forget? And what are the warranties?
Yeah, sure. So to answer the queries, we're basically a hardware provider in the sense that we're same as an inverter company. So we work with an installer partner network. Now, when they want to come, they may come to us, or we may go to them to say, look, if you've got a site that you're looking at Solshare, we'll give you the training so you can actually install that. So it's just like when batteries started becoming on the market, people did the training to be able to install batteries. Solshare is the same. So, for example, for the Hurdle Square project that hopefully get a case study soon for in Adelaide with that Carbon Neutral Awards, we had a solar or SIP, solar installation partner, come to us and say, we can do a shared solar here. So then the installer said, let me do the training, provided the training. We then implemented that. If, for example, they wanted to get batteries down the track, now with Solshare, the way it does work kind of offsets the need for batteries a little bit more. So then for batteries to be required, it'll be either just wanting to be completely green, which is perfectly fine, or they might have come down in price a little bit. So all we say there is, anyone can retrofit batteries down the track as well if they don't do it from the get-go, as long as they're familiar with Solshare is our kind of preference, to make sure everything's completed properly. And with a strata, they might just say, well, let's make sure our inverter that we choose is friendly with battery installs. So if it's a hybrid inverter, just ensuring that they then don't have to replace the inverter to be battery specific, depending on your type of battery integration. So you might have DC coupled batteries, AC coupled batteries, depending on the situation that you want to go down. To give us some reference, SA Housing are doing some projects with their public housing for their multi-tenancy projects, where they are utilising batteries with Solshare as well. So it's quite an exciting space, and hopefully getting some case studies done shortly, which we always pop on our website. So they'll be hopefully done in the next 6 months, but we'll see how we go. And on the warranty aspect, hopefully I've covered everything, Christina. Let me know if I've missed anything. Solshare comes with a minimum 10-year warranty. But all our testing, we do UL testing for our American market for all our products, and our UK product, which is actually the same as Australia. But yeah, 10-year minimum warranty, but it's there to sit within the 30 years of a typical system. So panels are usually 30 years minimum, or your tier 1, or 25 at least. Solshare is there to sit with that. It's a closed system, doesn't require maintenance as well. You've just got your one solar system maintenance aspect, as you should usually do, but then you've only got 1 or 2 or 3 inverters depending on the size of the tenancy. Have I covered everything there, Christina?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot.
Perfect, no worries at all. Ken?
And I knew I couldn't stay silent the whole time. I just need to. I just wanted to ask quickly around because, like you said, Solshare has it's the hardware that, and then also the software to make it all kind of like work equitably. And then I'm guessing there's a little bit of even development on potentially like the AI for that to even adjust on the fly rather than like manually, tweaking it in the future. But I was just had a question around some, whether it's like sometimes like some precincts, like let's just say like schools or something like that. Sometimes they have multiple NEMIs. So then some people will just say like, hey, the best solution in regards to sharing your solar output might be like a VPP, virtual power plant. Has there been a lot of interface between, virtual power plants or VPP setups with Solshare, or has those questions, has that not really presented itself yet?
It honestly, we haven't come across it too much, because in a sense, each apartment complex or precinct, depending on what we're doing, because they do get pretty much best use of that energy usage on site, and without incorporating batteries, we haven't done much on the VPP side. I would say that that may change going forward. And just to mention as well, Christina, Solshare is just that capital expenditure from the get-go. There's no ongoing costs either. So just like an inverter company, if you're buying an inverter, it's just that standalone, initial cost. Then we provide our monitoring portal and ongoing tech support if ever needed, as part of that component at the very get-go. So from the monitoring side, you also get to see all your demand or your usage data as a tenancy. But I think I've covered that, Ken, on the VPP. It's not something we're doing yet, but there's definitely scope for it. The biggest thing we see, because Solshare does sit all of the benefit with that end user, whether that's a tenant, an owner, as such, we see that they like to keep 100% of that. And that ends up being a better scenario for them on a simply financial basis.
Sweet. Thanks for the insight.
No worries, Ken. I will say as well, City of Adelaide's one of the leading councils, and it currently has the biggest rebate when it comes to councils within Australia. So kudos to those guys. They offer, it's around $500, I think, from memory per tenancy when they go for a shared solar solution. So it's always nice to see kind of Adelaide leading the way of that. So I always, when I'm chatting to other councils on the daily, it's always sharing that information, which is quite exciting.
Proud Adelaideans. Thank you everyone who's participated. Are there any last questions? We probably have time for one more. Vikram, you can see your hands raised.
Yeah, hi. Just got a question there on a very informative session, Will. Thanks so much. It's been very interesting. And keen to see if your product can be used in a situation where it's not necessarily multi-tenanted, but say in an institutional type setting, school, a university, that type of institution where I guess it will be a campus where there might be different functions happening in different parts of the campus, where the client would have an electricity supply deal with one retailer, but there would be a number of meters supplying that power to different parts of the campus. Can the Solshare product be used to as a demand management tool, so that the energy that's generated can be, I guess, directed to the areas of highest need? I really liked your graph there in your second slide, where you can match the actual supply of energy to where it's required at different points of time during the day, and that's a good design tool.
Yeah, thank you, Vikram. I appreciate the question. Solshare itself, each module that we have can connect up to 15 connections. So with that, we can have either 5 3-phase connections or 15 single phase, or a mixture of the two. And for anyone that wants a bit more info on that, just flick me an email, get in touch, and I can share some brochures as well. The other other aspect of that, Solshare itself per module has a maximum input of 22 kilowatts AC as well. So depending on the size or the energy requirements of the connections that it's been connected to, it may or may not be suitable. Now, keeping in mind, if you had, say, three phase meters, say on a school site, for example, you could connect all three phase meters to the one system. So everyone would be pulling from the same system. And then Solshare on the software side of things would be going, well, we're measuring everyone's demand at any one time. And it means that everyone has the capability to receive up to 22 kilowatts AC at any one time. So, you know, if everyone was pulling equally from all 3 meters, you'd probably get about 6.6 across the 3 phases. But if there was a priority on, you know, one of the meters to obtain more energy, then they could, in theory, get up to 22 kilowatts AC at any one time. We commonly see, you know, with your panels are usually a little bit higher than your AC rating. So you might have 26 kilowatts of panels, for example, in an associated install. So it just depends on your energy usage. If you're limited by roof space is usually a key thing, and Solshare is a usable option there. And yeah, thank you for flicking those through, Ken. So note those down if you want to get in touch or discuss a potential project, and we can go from there.
Thank you, everybody. We're just very conscious of people needing to get back to work, and appreciate your time to come and have a chat and have a cup of tea with us this morning. So enjoy the rest of your morning. Thank you so much, Will. I think, was it anything else?
That was it. Thank
We'll
you,
just wrap
Will.
up.
Thank you, everyone. As the last sustainability of the year, have a wonderful holiday festive season, and we will be back again in the new year and with lots of new events.
See you next year.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, guys.